Hi everyone, I'm Josh and I'm back from winter break. I'm right here in Fort Worth about to start another semester of medical school. So, I'm making this video because back when I went to Super Nintendo World before entering medical school, I ran into a subscriber. Her name is Yang. So Yang, if you're watching, I'm doing this video because I remember back when I met her, we talked for a bit, and one of the videos she was suggesting that I make was a video talking about all of the medical schools I applied to, all of the ones I interviewed at, and then the ones I got into, and then of course the one that I'm going to right now is TCU. So she was a little curious about how many schools I applied to, and I'm sure a lot of you guys who are watching my videos are very curious about that too. So it kind of doesn't make sense that I got in, and I haven't really shared about which schools I've gotten into, and I'm happy to share about that on this new year. Today's January 1st. Of course, I'm probably gonna release this video like a couple days later. So yeah, that's usually how I roll, guys. You know, I don't release videos on the same day. It takes like a while to edit, and I have other videos I need to release before this one. So I usually like to release my videos in chronological order in the way I film them. So yeah, just wait, and there's more to come. But anyway, I'm gonna get straight to the point and just talk about the schools that I applied to. Okay, so how many schools did I apply to for medical school? I actually applied to 16, which looking back, I realize is on the lower end of applying to medical schools. A lot of people usually apply to like 20 or 30. That's like a good average. So 16 is kind of not that much. And yeah, it just happened to be that way because a big reason why I applied to so little schools was because I was fairly sure I wanted to stay in California, and California is a very competitive state to go to medical school in. But given my stats, I had a 4.0 when I was in college, and then I also got a 517 on my MCAT. I looked on MSAR, and my stats, they met the average, if not a little bit above average, for a good portion of the California schools, except for like the hard ones like Stanford and UCLA. Those schools are really difficult to get into in California. But yeah, that was, and UCSF too. But I ended up applying to mostly California schools because I wanted to stay close to home, and I knew I was competitive enough to have a chance to hopefully get in those schools. Looking back, I wish I applied to more states, because TCU was the only school I applied to in Texas. And I absolutely love how I applied to this school because it's been awesome. Funny enough, I mean, not to get too off topic, but the reason why I applied to TCU was because I connected with an MCAT study buddy who told me about this medical school and how it was new because my MCAT study buddy, she went to TCU undergrad, and she was telling me about how she wanted to apply to TCU for the medical school. And then I started to look into it, and I told myself, whoa, this sounds like a really good program. I'm gonna save this piece of information and put it in my back pocket and then take it out once I apply to medical school, which is exactly what I ended up doing. So literally, if a friend didn't tell me about this school, I would not have applied, which is kind of insane. So it was because of a study buddy who I was studying with. It was wild. But anyway, so what schools did I apply to? Okay, all 16 schools. So I have my Google Doc right here. That's why I'm constantly looking at my iPad down below because yeah, I have all the schools. So the 16 schools I applied to are Kaiser Permanente in Pasadena, USC, UC San Francisco, UC San Diego, UCLA, the David Geffen School of Medicine, and then I also applied to the UCLA Charles Drew School of Medicine. I applied to UCI, Stanford, NYU, and I applied to California North State University College of Medicine. I applied to TCU, which is where I'm going right now as a first-year medical student. I've completed my first semester here. UCR, University of Toledo in Ohio, California, CUSM, California University of Sciences and Medicine, Loma Linda, and then Harvard. So those were the 16 schools I applied to. So most of them were in California. And then TC was the only one in Texas I applied to. And then I did apply to a couple high reach schools in the East Coast. And I'm going to go through each school individually and just talk about, how that went. And I'll give you guys more details about it. Of course, yeah, let's just jump into it. So the first school, Kaiser. So I remember when I was applying to medical school, Kaiser Medical School was actually my dream medical school because for several reasons. Number one, it's in Pasadena. So out of all of the medical schools, you know, within it's the closest one to where I live. So it would have made coming home extremely easy because Pasadena is only like 15, 20 minutes away from where I live. So that was a big reason to go there. And of course, it was backed by Kaiser Permanente, which they have like really, really good hospitals. And a lot of people were really excited when they were starting up their medical school. And I mean, a huge reason I wanted to go too was because for the first 5 classes, they were giving a free tuition. So that was a strong motivator for me to apply to that school. And that's also why it's extremely competitive because everybody wants to apply to schools that have free tuition. I wouldn't blame you guys because a medical school, it can cost like about $400,000 if you include living expenses and depending on the tuition you get. So, yeah, you would want to get rid of that cost. Like getting rid of student debt is an extremely strong motivator to apply to that school. So I remember I submitted the secondary to that school first. And unfortunately, I did not get an interview. And ultimately, I did not get in that school. So yeah, that was a bit sad. But even though my stats, they were at the level that the school is asking for. But something that I've come to learn along the journey is that your stats, they get you in the door, but you need more in terms of extracurriculars and then meaningful experiences in order to get admitted, because there's a lot of students who have really, really good stats, so stats is not enough to get you into these schools. And I think that was somewhat of a mistake I made. And that's why I'm saying I should have applied to more out-of-state schools. But then again, also, I'm actually happy that I applied to a relatively small number of schools because I'm extremely happy where I'm at right now at TCU. So in one sense, I'm glad that I didn't waste more money applying to like 30 or 40 schools when I knew like I would have ended up in TCU happily where I am right now, So looking back, in some ways, I wish I applied to more states, but in other ways, I'm like, no, I'm actually happy with where I'm at right now. And I'm glad I didn't waste extra effort and money trying to get into even more schools, and to which, ultimately you have to go to just one school. So yeah, I see it in those ways. Okay, anyway, Kaiser. Did not get an interview, did not get in. I'm just gonna go rapid fire with these schools, guys. Okay, USC. I did not get an interview and also did not get in. Okay, UC San Francisco. I got an interview, but I did not get in. So you see how that works? UCSF is like one of the top medical schools in the country, if not in the world. And I'm just surprised how some schools, I guess maybe some schools like my statements better than other schools. So I'm not too sure, how it really works behind the scenes, But for some reason, UCSF gave me an interview. But of course, I did not get in. But nonetheless, I was extremely proud that I got an interview at such a really competitive school. So I was happy about that. All right, UC San Diego. I did not get an interview and did not get in. UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine. Did not get an interview, did not get in. And then to Charles Drew, I also did not get an interview and I did not get in. Okay. Now, Stanford, I did not get an interview and I did not get in. Okay, UCI. UCI is a very interesting school because I did get an interview and I ended up getting waitlisted to UCI. When it came to commit to a medical school, I was actually really in between TCU and then debating if I would go to UCI if they took me off of the wait list. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, now that I'm at TCU, given how happy I am right here, UCI never took me off of the wait list. And they ended up sending me an official rejection letter about like 3 months when I was in medical school at TCU. So UCI was very close. I could have gotten extremely close to getting accepted, but I got waitlisted at UCI. And I'll never know if I like how far or how close I was to getting off of that wait list. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. I'm happy I'm in a new area in Texas. I think this experience here at TCU, it really like it's really opened my mind a lot, because I would have pigeonholed myself staying close to home in California, but I'm glad I got in TCU because I get to explore a new area and see how medicine works in a different part of the country. And I've always fantasized about living in Texas. So again, I'm really happy with TCU. I'm just going over this list because, again, one of my subscribers asked me about which schools I got into and got interviews at, and I'm just happy to share that. Yeah, I just want to make that clear, guys, that I'm extremely happy with where I'm at. And I have, I say, oh, I should have done this, should have done that, but ultimately, I have no regrets. I'm just giving this as advice to you all because you do not really want to pigeonhole yourself to applying to schools in a competitive state like California. You want to cast your net wide so you can get into as many schools as possible. That's the reason why I'm giving this advice. Okay. So UCI, a very interesting story. Okay, NYU is next. NYU, that was the only school in New York I applied to. And the reason why was because even though their stats were a bit out of my reach, even as a decently competitive applicant, I applied there because they had free tuition. And I told myself, hey, I better throw my hat in the ring because who knows, right? Who knows? Maybe I could get an interview there. And guess what? I ended up getting an interview at NYU for some reason, and it was a really cool interview experience. Now, of course, I did not get into that medical school, and it's okay. I think I was just extremely proud of myself for having gotten an interview from such a top tier school, especially one that like would have, it's a really insane school. Like the NYU Langone Hospital, it's a really good hospital, and I'm going to see if I could try to apply to maybe an away rotation there, So, yeah, I wouldn't say that the door for NYU is like shut in that sense, I could try applying to an away rotation, But nonetheless, I'm extremely proud to have gotten an interview there, even though I didn't get in. It's a really monumental task to get an interview at these really competitive schools. So, yeah, that's something that kind of shocked me because NYU is a lot more competitive than some of the other schools I got no interview from. So it's kind of interesting how that works. Okay, California North State University College of Medicine. I ended up getting accepted to that school. So it's a school in Sacramento. But of course, I'm at TCU, so that's the school I ended up choosing. TCU, well, I'm here right now, so you guys know how that went. Okay, UCR, I did not get an interview and I did not get in. And then I also did not get an interview from Toledo and I did not get in. So it's kind of interesting because UCR and Toledo are not nearly as competitive as NYU. And for some reason, they didn't want to give me an interview. Yeah, NYU did. So I'm not entirely sure what factors are at play right there. I suspect, again, and this is just my speculation, I suspect that with these schools, NYU wants to increase their class diversity. And what I mean by that is, diversity, it means a whole bunch of things. It means, of course, racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds. That's usually what people think of when they first think of diversity. But I remember I was reading this on Harvard Medical School's website that they prided themselves upon having a huge representation across many undergraduate universities across the country. So I went to a very, very, very small undergrad. My undergrad, Whittier College, only has a population of 1,600 students. So I speculate a reason why I might have gotten an interview at these really competitive schools is because they probably may not have gotten very many people at all from Whittier who applied to these schools. And they were kind of interested in hearing my story about this California guy who went to a really tiny private small school. So I'm not too sure exactly, but I suspect that where you go to undergrad can have a bit of a bearing on the medical school admissions process. Again, I'm not an admissions officer, so don't take my word as gospel, but this is just my speculation because I noticed that I tended to get interviews at very competitive out-of-state schools, whereas I did not have too much luck with getting interviews within my home state. And again, this plays into the fact that California is a very competitive state to go to medical school in. So I think all of those factors account into what happened. And of course, there's other factors beyond my control. They probably liked a certain extracurricular I did, my research activities. Again, I did research at Caltech, and I made a video about that somewhere in my channel. So I've gotten a lot of questions about my research at Caltech when I was interviewing at medical school, because people know the name Caltech. They know the rivalry between Caltech and MIT, and they probably know it from Big Bang Theory too. So a lot of people know that these Nobel laureates go to Caltech, So yeah, it has a pretty big name, and I've gotten a lot of curious questions about that when I was interviewing at medical schools. So yeah, all right, let's continue down the list. So only 3 more schools. California University of Sciences and Medicine. I ended up getting into that school. So it was 3 acceptances total out of 16, which that's pretty low, but nonetheless, that can actually be decently normal because a lot of times people, they can apply to like 30, 40 schools and they may only get into like 1, maybe 2 or 3. Like getting into one school is incredibly difficult because at TCU, we were told that the admissions rate, the acceptance rate for TCU was less than 1%. That's insane. For a single medical school, it's usually like that. It's less than 1%, if not even lower than that. It may even be a fraction of a percent, of 1%, maybe like 0.5 or 0.4%. I'm just making up these numbers, but yeah, getting into medical school, regardless of which medical school it is no easy feat. So you should be incredibly proud that you get into at least one medical school, because that's a challenge in of itself. So yeah, getting into 3 out of 16, I would consider that fairly good, especially given that I applied to so many high tier schools and I did not get into a lot of them. So yeah. So, okay, California University of Sciences and Medicine, I got into that school. Of course, when I say I got into that school, obviously that means I got an interview and they liked my interview, so they accepted me. Okay, Loma Linda, I got an interview from that school and I ended up getting waitlisted, and I also did not get taken off the wait list. Okay, and then the last school, Harvard. Okay, this school, it's very interesting because I'll tell you this. I remember when I was doing the secondaries for Harvard, Harvard is the only, at least to my knowledge, of the schools I applied to, it was the only medical school that did not do rolling admissions. So a lot of times in medical schools, they'll send you're required to write a primary personal statement, which is pretty much a statement in like 5,300 characters answering the question, why do you want to become a doctor, based off of the experiences you've had so far up to applying to medical school. So you want to answer that question in your primary statement. So you send that through AMCAS usually, or if you're doing Texas, TMD, SAS, or ACOMAS if you're applying to DO. So you would send those statements in those application portals, and then they would all go out to every single medical school you're applying to. So you send out your primary statements and you get your secondaries back. Now, secondaries, they are often personal statements that are tailored to what the school specifically wants to know about you. So some schools, they will have secondaries that are different than other schools. Now, I will tell you though, a lot of times, secondaries from medical schools rarely change. They often tend to be the same prompt over again. And there's databases online that have the secondary prompts for certain medical schools. And given how they rarely change, something that I did and something that I highly suggest you do as well is to go online, look at the questions, copy those questions from the medical schools you want to apply to. Copy the question from your dream school, put it on a Google Doc and start writing it. Start drafting. Even if you're like a year out from applying to that school, start thinking about the experiences that you've had that led up to what the prompt wants you to answer in those questions. You want to start thinking about those questions and attacking them. Start creating a plan early on for those secondaries, because you can pre-write them. That's what I'm telling you guys to do. Given that secondaries rarely change year to year for medical schools, pre-write them. That's my big advice, So, all right, the story about Harvard. So Harvard, this might come as a shocker, but I ended up getting an interview from that school, which was crazy because it is the most difficult medical school to get into across the country. It's the most competitive. Harvard is like number one, in the world too. So when I got an interview, I could not believe my eyes. And I was like genuinely shocked that they wanted to interview a regular person like me, Of course, I did not get into that school, but nonetheless, I'm extremely proud that they interviewed me. And I think a reason why they interviewed me is, again, what I told you guys about. I went on their website and I read that they tended to pride themselves upon having a lot of representation from many different undergraduates across the US. So that's where I suspect that, where I went to undergrad, being a small school, may have helped. Again, I'm not an admissions officer, so this is not a definitive, answer, so to say. This is just my own speculation, having gone through the process and now being accepted and even completing my first 6 months of medical school. So yeah, that's pretty much a breakdown of the schools that I've gotten into, gotten rejected from, gotten accepted to, and of course I'm at TC right now. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and you gained a lot of insight into how the medical school admissions process was for me. And I hope you picked up some advice about how you, if you're applying to medical school right now, can maximize your success. In short, you want to cast your net wide. You also want to start pre-writing your primary personal statement and your secondary personal statements. Because I remember for the schools that I tended to get interviews from, okay, so for the primary, I submitted it on the very first day it opened. So I really wanted medical schools to I didn't want rolling admissions to be a reason why I didn't get an interview. So I just submitted my primary as soon as it opened. And then with the secondaries, the way I did it was I completed my dream schools first, and then I would start working on the other ones, later on. So I submitted a Kaiser first, because that was my dream school, at the when I was applying to medical school, and then I worked my way down, And then I also completed secondaries based on which schools got back to me first, because some schools get back to you right off the bat, and then others, they take a while. So you also want to factor that in, But again, if you can pre-write your secondaries, kudos to you. That's really going to help you a lot because, I didn't pre-write all of my secondaries, and even then it was still a lot of work writing secondaries to 16 medical schools. And I told you guys, that's considered the lower end. So I cannot imagine how much work other people have done for applying to 30 or 40 medical schools. That's a lot. So that's why I'm suggesting you pre-write your secondaries, because the summer in which they send them out, it's going to be an incredibly busy summer. And you might be overwhelmed at which secondaries you should work on and which ones you should submit. Because my turnaround time was about 2 to 3 days for these secondaries, and I was extremely stressed. I was worried that if I took an extra day, I wouldn't get an interview, So, yeah. again, I completed those secondaries as fast as I could, and I actually did not do Harvard's until close to the deadline because Harvard specifically said in their secondaries and in their statements that they were sending me about their application, that they do not admit applicants on a rolling basis. So it doesn't matter if you completed your secondary as soon as they sent it or even close to the deadline, they will consider every single applicant the same. So I told myself, why stress myself out with like doing Harvard at the beginning? And I think that could also be a factor as to why I got an interview there, because I remember I submitted Harvard secondary at the kind of at the last minute, close to the deadline. And I genuinely took like a ton of time writing it. So I took like a lot more time than I did for my other secondaries. And I had time to send it out to professors and then other friends, and then to read over it, and to give me criticism and feedback, constructive criticism. So I had that secondary had a lot more, how would you say, edits, and it was a lot more matured compared to a lot of my other secondaries. So I think Harvard's policy of not having rolling admissions was definitely something that played to, I think, my advantage of getting an interview there, was that I had a lot of time to work on that secondary. And it was definitely a secondary I spent the most time writing because, it was the last one I did, and there was a hard deadline, but it wasn't rolling, so that it took away a ton of stress from me that their admissions weren't rolling. So read up on those policies, because to my knowledge, of those 16 schools, Harvard was the one that did it that way. So if you guys read up and find that other medical schools also do not do rolling admissions, please save those secondaries for last. And once you get to those secondaries, spend a lot of time writing them, because it's gonna definitely play to your benefit. So those are my tips and tricks for doing well on your secondaries, given somebody who's gone through the process. So I really hope you guys enjoy this video and gained a lot from it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.